You don't really have a problem until you run from your problem. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Sales Podcast. This is Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer. This is episode 161, but it's number 3 of the inaugural SEAL Week. SEAL Week I kicked off during the week of Veterans Day. I'm recording this intro on Veterans Day, November 11th, so happy Veterans Day to all my fellow vets. But I started SEAL Week to raise funds for the Tampa Bay Frogman Swim. It's a 3.1-mile swim across Tampa Bay, 5 kilometers, 5 clicks for my military brothers and sisters. But it's 5 kilometers across Tampa Bay. It raises money that is donated to the Navy SEAL Foundation, and that gives money and aid to the families of Navy SEALs that have been wounded in combat or have died in combat. It's a great cause, great charity. It's a great event. I had never done open water swimming before, and I have a classmate that is still a Navy SEAL, and he used his Jedi mind tricks, his power of Navy SEAL persuasion to get me to jump in the water, and now I love it. I'm doing it again January 17th. So as you visit this page, if you're looking at the show notes, it's at thesaleswhisper.com/session 161. But you'll see links for helpwesswim.org. That's really where we want you to go this week, helpwesswim.org, and donate to my swim. The goal is to raise $10,000 personally for this swim. And so by you listening to this, commenting, sharing, helping get the word out, and donating a few bucks of your own is going to help us do just that. So far, you've heard from Joel Lambert, former Navy SEAL, who is now the star of Lone Target. You want to check him out on TV. It's a pretty cool show. Great guy. Yesterday, we had on Mr. Scott McEwen. He is the author of American Sniper, the story of Chris Kyle, the deadliest sniper in American history. It's also a movie Bradley Cooper did with Clint Eastwood. So he pulled no punches yesterday. Today we have Mr. Dan O'Shea, a Naval Academy graduate, U.S. Navy SEAL. He did a lot in the area of terror and hostage negotiations and addressing those issues, if you will. He's now a civilian. You see him a lot on the news channels. He's constantly interviewed on what's going on around the world. He's very vocal. You want to, normally I listen to podcasts at double speed, or at least 50%. Dan, you're probably going to have to dial it back to half speed. I've never heard a human being talk so fast, but you can just tell he's high energy, he's emotional, he's involved, he's engaged. And these are the type of people, obviously, we want defending us, both on active duty, and, he's still defending us as a consultant, as an advisor. And in his work, he is helping get the word out on what needs to be done to protect our nation's borders. But he's also an entrepreneur now, right? So that's why I have him on, is to share these stories that how our Navy SEALs are making the transition into the business world, and how their skills, their training, their mindset that was honed, and developed in military service, how that's benefiting them as civilians. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Dan O'Shea. Dan O'Shea, all the way from the East Coast. I mean, you're my second Naval Academy grad, so I've learned to speak more slowly when I talk to Navy guys. So, man, welcome to the Sales Podcast. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. I think you're getting the wrong academy. I didn't go to West Point, that little junior college with a Division III football team up on the Hudson. I did go to Navy, and we are educated, so you can speak fast, no worries.
Hey, well, you put a whooping on my Falcons this year, so maybe I have to bow down for now. But hey, when I was there, we won. That's all I have to say. That's all I'm saying.
It doesn't matter. You're only as good as your last game, and you got smoked the last game. So I'm gonna take that from you guys.
Tough crowd. Well, man, thanks for helping me kick off this SEAL Week. For those that don't know, you may not know your biography. I have said a little bit, on the lead in, but I didn't want to steal all your thunder. I mean, would you mind take a minute or two, kind of give our listeners a little bit of your background? Obviously, you were part of the teams, but let us know kind of who you are, what you've been up to, and then we'll kind of dive down the rabbit hole?
Sure. So, I'm a 1991 Naval Academy grad. I went straight out to BUD/S training. Spent 7 years out on a West Coast SEAL team. I did multiple deployments back and forth to the Middle East, and then, late 90s, nothing was really going on, and then decided to move on with my life and do other things. Well, that all changed in 9/11 like it did for every American. And I, of course, felt desire and need and commitment, and literally was back in service, back in uniform a day after the attacks, going back in the reserves and mobilized. And then I did 2.5+ years back on active duty. That's why I ended up in Tampa, Florida. I was mobilized, sent to Special Operations Command Central, served as a planner, liaison officer to the command up at the higher headquarters at CENTCOM, and deployed for what was supposed to be my last, 90-day assignment in the box, doing sandbox, if you will, back in Iraq, to do interagency coordination. And my claim to fame, probably more than anything else over my career, was that 90-day tour ended up becoming 2 years working what became, 400+ international kidnapping cases, working at an entity, an organization I helped establish called the Hostage Working Group at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. And the working group worked across the diplomacy, the intelligence, the law enforcement, and our special ops ranks to try and address and combat this hostage terrorism that we saw resurrect itself with ISIS and ISIL, with the latest round of beheadings and the kidnappings of Boko Haram and the 300+ girls. So this whole hostage terrorism is something that really originated on my watch. I mean, terrorism and kidnapping has been around for decades and generations, and it's definitely a terrorism event. But the Al Qaeda affiliated groups like ISIS and its Islamic affiliates have really taken the kidnapping tactic to the next level. And I've made it my, at one point in my life, mission to help eradicate the threat. Played a small role in coordinating the effort, the interagency effort, and we turned the tide. We did turn the tide. Kidnappings went from 30, 40 a month in Baghdad down to single digits by the time I left, and we ended up wiping out the number one and major kidnapping ring in Baghdad in particular, and kidnappings dropped off the radar. But sadly, they've resurrected themselves like the phoenix that ISIS is, and Al Qaeda in Iraq, they were defeated, they were destroyed. I was there on the ground for the invasion. I was there from 2004 through 2006, back in 2007, and back in 2010 when Iraq was actually. The surge had worked. I don't care what anyone says. I don't need to hear it from a historian that tries to tell me otherwise what I saw firsthand on the ground. But we did win the war in Iraq. But we, as my colleagues like to say, this current administration decided to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And now, as we've shown, leadership from behind, not engaging on the international stage, has brought us to where we are. And it's a world that is more in disorder than ever. The Russian bear has come back full force. 4 years ago, Mitt Romney was laughed off in a presidential debate about, the 1980s wanting their foreign policy back. Well, we've got not only the 1980s Cold War foreign policy front and center, we've got a threat on the world in the form of ISIS or ISIL, whatever the next generation of this Islamist ideology is going to present. And we're not addressing it, and we will have to address it because it is coming. It is coming to the West. This immigration issue that we're dealing with now, or not us, but Europe is dealing with, and their borders. It's not an immigration; it's an invasion, and people need to be aware of it. So I've done multiple deployments back and forth between Iraq and Afghanistan. I've done everything across the spectrum from counterterrorism, counter kidnapping, information operations, and then counterinsurgency. And there's been a vacuum that has been left in the world, and unfortunately. I'm trying to make that transition. I'm working with a private sector company here in Florida, back at, headquartered in Clearwater. We're doing some good things, but, the fight's there. And I say one of my favorite quotes and, that is timeless as it was the day it was first spoken in Greek, that only the dead have seen the end of war. And that was said by Plato circa 2,400 years ago. And sadly, that's still the case today, that we will always have conflict. We will always have people that threaten our way of life. And, thank God for the SEALs, thank God for the Rangers, SF, Special Forces, Marines, and infantry, and every man and woman that stands up to go serve their country. But we will always need men to go stand in the fray and protect that line and be part of that Spartan 300 perspective of 1/10 of 1 percentage point of this country that will always see evil and want to deal with it on black and white terms. And That's what the SEAL community is all about. That's what the fundraiser and the many of the authors I know you have coming this week. They are SEALs, and many I know most of them. I've served with them. Some of them are my friends and my brother. They're all my brothers, and they all have a story to tell. I mean, we used to shy away from the media, and for a good reason. Now that seems like every other week a new SEAL book's coming out, and the reality is most of us have a story to tell, and we have lessons learned that apply to life, they apply to your personal life, and they apply to business. So I think that it's why you guys reach out to us and want to ask us questions and inquire, because there are takeaways that apply from life in the teams and life in the real world. So without further ado, if you have a question for me, I'm ready to answer whatever you have.
Well, we could go forever, man. But you said something I want to have you focus in on, and you talk about in the world stage, we're not addressing the problems that we face. But for our listeners that are in sales, that are business owners, entrepreneurs, can you talk about how that applies in the private sector, where hiding from a problem doesn't make it go away? Because maybe that problem is you're not making enough sales. Maybe your marketing is terrible. Maybe you're surrounded by bad people. You don't have a good program in place for hiring and training and retention, or HR, or operations. Things are a mess. I mean, we can only handle so much, but
right.
But still, I mean, hiding from it never makes a problem better, does it?
No, and those are, there are applications, and you've laid out some really good business problem sets that kind of compare, almost point for point, because if, the issue comes down to leadership. I mean, you've got your tactical elements on the ground that are dealing in the fight with going after sales or going after more market share, or HR, we're not hiring the right people, or we're not firing the people we need to fire. And when you let that problem fester, that small problem that can be addressed tactically and up front, when you've got good leadership and good delegated leadership down into the trenches, into the company, to address the problem straight up, or have an open communication within that company chain of command, to be a tactical guy out in the field, be a salesman, something's wrong, and you're writing in your emails or your reports up to your chain of command, and or you should have direct access to your boss to say, boss, hey, we're having problems here. We need to address it. But when you ignore those problems and you pretend that they don't exist, which is really the worst case, then that little problem grows into a cancer, and that's just as in life. We keep pretending that evil doesn't exist. Well, in the business world, if you pretend you don't have a problem, you'll deal with it next quarter. Well, that's where you have catastrophic failure in companies, where you have people that go out of business. When the banking crisis we had, I mean, a lot of that was in large part based on integrity and the fact that people were knowing that they're still selling bad stock, or they're still selling bad product. When, take for example, here's a perfect example. Look at Volkswagen. Volkswagen has prided itself on German engineering, and really they're the original Bug. They're kind of almost like the car of the green generation. That goes back to when you and I were growing up, and I'm older than you. The Beetle Bug was like that, and in particular the van, the VW van. That was the iconic symbol of the hippie generation, and that the German engineering, it was, and in large part for Germany, it was a way for them to get away from their Nazi Germany past, and was one of their very, had strong market share around the world. Let's be honest, Germans make great cars. They have the Porsche, the BMW, but the Beetle was probably, or say the Volkswagen brand was probably the most beloved, because no one loves a German product other than for its efficiency. But in terms of having a personal connection, and of course being hippie and being green, you want to connect it to, positive on the environment and better gas saving and so on and so forth. Well, this whole scandal with the diesel, they put in actually a chip to get past the U.S. emissions, where there being more pollution. I mean, that's a brand disaster that they may never recover from. And what it came down to is integrity. They knew they were doing the wrong thing. They're going counter to brand, and that's going to have catastrophic impact on VW henceforth. It's the little things. It's the small things about having integrity, about doing the right thing, and then addressing a problem that needs to be addressed, because those little problems can turn out to be multi-million, if not billion-dollar recalls, or can destroy a company. And it really comes down to, when you see a problem, you got to identify it, and you got to deal with it, and you got to address it. And the problems you address early on, they're going to be painful, they're going to cost money, but the consequences of not dealing with those problems can be catastrophic and can actually destroy your company. So that's kind of an analogy where leadership is leadership. It's leadership in the SEAL teams, leadership in the business world. It's having the ability. One thing we prided ourselves on the teams, our guys were good at everything, and we were required to know a little bit about everything. As an officer in the teams, I wasn't the best. I had to know how to do everything my guys did. Now, certainly not to the level of them, and in terms of weapon management or in the diving department, or other areas, or in the radio. But in our line of work, if I lose a guy, if my RTO, my radio man dies or gets shot, I now have to use the radio because I'm continuous. So we cross-train, and it's not just me, because that's why we teach not only competency in our skills across the spectrum within the company or within the SEAL platoon, we teach it because we have to be redundant, because you never know when that person is going to have to step up and be in charge. So how you build an effective fighting force or an effective sales force, the principles are the same. Look after your people, train your people, hold them accountable, and most importantly, hold yourself accountable, and you'll be successful.
So where, like in the business world, one of the famous stories I remember is when Henry Ford was basically being sued, antitrust or whatever. And, they're like, hey, you don't know jack about this or that. And he's like, I got 15 buttons on my desk. You want to know about transmissions? I hit this button. I have the smartest transmission guy in the world. He'll be here in 2 minutes. You want to know about, the combustion engine? I hit this button. So how much do you think the leader has to be that expert versus just has to be a leader and just bring good people together and motivate them?
Well, listen, leadership is about competence. At the end of the day, leadership is many times an innate skill. Some people have that charisma, but, this whole adage, are leaders made or are they born? Is it an inherent skill or not? And I mean, I'm of the argument that no, there are obviously natural born leaders. There are natural born people that are given certain characteristics that make them natural to be, like look at Hollywood. Half the men and women in Hollywood, they are more than just a pretty face or someone who's in good shape to be that successful. Because there's plenty of good-looking women and men in Hollywood trying to break into the system, to become a big screen actor, but they have to show some confidence. But at the end of the day, Hollywood is Hollywood. Real life, being a leader in running a business or running a SEAL command or a small, SF element, Special Forces element, a Ranger company. In our world, in the military, you don't get to leadership position without showing competence, because if you don't understand the missions, and that's why, the grooming of officer leadership in the teams happens on day one, but it takes, 5 or 6 years until you're a platoon commander, learning all the other jobs. And many times, how we groom officers in the teams, when we come in as ensigns, we come into buds, and we are thrown into a platoon, many times as the second or the third officer, and we'll take on a role that it's maybe an enlisted man's role. We might go on a reconnaissance mission or be responsible for carrying the radio or carrying the machine gun. I mean, I remember carrying the M60 machine gun while I was a platoon commander, not because it just called for that. And I'm the smallest guy in the platoon. I'm also the platoon commander. But, yeah, in that mission set, it required me to carry the M60 machine gun. So now I'm not the best M60 machine gun in the platoon, of course, but I knew how to operate it, and in that mission it called for it. So you have to be competent, because if your people beneath you think that you don't know their job, like how to run a sales department or how to deliver sales or how to go after market share. If you haven't done it, and it all comes from time and experience. You don't become a CEO or a VP at a company right out of college. I mean, some kids in this generation think that's how it works, but no, that's not the case. You have to spend time and effort. And one of the critical things, what makes Special Operations Forces so capable, not just SEALs, it's, my brothers across the spectrum, to the Rangers, to the Special Forces, to the MARSOC Marines, everyone gets cross-trained and everyone's competent. And so by the time you are reporting to that captain or that, that Navy lieutenant up to the, Navy commander, Navy captain or Army 06 colonel or Marine colonel, that level of competency is there, and the guys know it, because you don't make those ranks in the special ops community without being competent and being very good at what all the skill sets are required. So, yeah, leadership's a part of it. A lot of charisma is involved. But the most important thing to leadership is competency, and that you have to understand the business model and what your folks are doing, so you can, so they can't bullshit you, because that can be a critical thing. And unless you're unless you're the CEO of the company puts his son in charge of the company with no experience, what happens to those companies? They last one generation. So
Right.
smart CEOs, smart companies will groom their people up from the, the critical thing, like one thing I prided myself on in the teams, and as do most, officers within the special ops community, is you learn everything. And, there's a grooming pattern, and you want to be the best shot. You want to be the best guy at everything you can do, but knowing that, hey, at the end of the day, that reconnaissance mission is going to be taken on by your snipers. And we do send, we on occasion, we'll send officers into these certain schools like sniper school to give them better perspective on how to employ snipers down the road. And that's all that really matters, because if your people don't expect you to necessarily go on the mission, but they know that you're competent to go on, to do the mission themselves, if need be. And that's what matters to them. It's not just education. A lot of it's experience. But the most important thing about leadership, at least from my community, and I know that would apply to the business thing, is you have to be competent at what you're doing, because your guys, your people will see right through you. If you're talking out your backside and you're not making, and you haven't been there and you really don't know what you're talking about, no matter how pretty the words sound, it's not going to add up. So competence I think is critical for, effective leadership, other than, quote, just being a leader, as a standalone. Competence, leadership without confidence is just something. It's like a Hollywood actor. There's nothing. I sell a lot of movies, but it's not deep, if you will.
I know the saying in the SEALs is the only easy day was yesterday, right? And you brought up some of the things, tackle the problems head on, address them early. Zig Ziglar would always say, if you got to eat a frog, there's no use staring at it, right? And you might as well eat the biggest one first if you have more than one to eat. But how, like in the teams, you're surrounded by motivated type A personality people that you can feed off of one another, right, and keep each other going. How can people in the private sector do that? I mean, it's why I offer coaching programs and things, but, where have you seen that in the private sector, or ways to, how do you stay motivated? I think I know it's you got that fire in your belly and you got a mission bigger than yourself, but you think that's the key, is to have a goal, have a dream, have a mission bigger than you, and that'll keep you hungry and willing to eat that frog every day?
Well, you know what? It's the companies, as a SEAL, you kind of hit on some of them. The only day was yesterday. And that is the thing about being at a SEAL team. It's the most competitive place you'll ever be in your life. I mean, SEALs want to win at everything. And everything's a competition. And I mean everything. It can be, the morning PT. It can be, what platoon is better. I mean, you feed off that. It's an energy. Now, you can't always, I'll never in my life go back to the environment I had being back in the teams. It just, you won't ever find that in the private sector 100%. Some companies that hire only, military type folks, you can get an essence of that for sure. But in the private sector, the key things that separate you is kind of things you talked about. If you're at a company that serves a higher purpose, that's critical. If you serve a mission, I've seen some very inspired people in the non-government organization, folks that just do simply, they help their fellow man and woman. They're servants. They're all about being servants and the higher cause. You can be inspired in those environments on a massive scale. I mean, the critical thing, for leadership and for, finding the company that embraces, no one in this day and age, no one gets hired for 25, 30 years anymore and gets that golden watch and that parachute retirement plan anymore from like the big blue, IBM or General Motors. I mean, those days are gone, because people, unfortunately, are so fickle. I don't think they can handle doing the same automation job for the next 25, 30 years. So that's a benefit and a curse. But, holding on to talent in this day and age is challenging. And a lot of it is you have to connect your people to a cause higher than self. And that's a critical thing with leadership. I've done, leadership lectures at companies that you would never think have anything inspiring to work for or work towards. But if you got good leadership and connect the dots to why you do what you do, what larger purpose it serves, and or you make the environment about, a team environment. You can make it competitive. I've worked, in Southern California, I used to get hired to do like corporate team building events in the outdoors. We'd put people through like a little mini adventure race on the beach, or, a little even, kind of PT, if you will, to kind of, make a competitive drive. And these companies that do well, like, encourage healthy living options. And it makes sense for a company. I mean, you want to have a company that focuses on priorities and balances in life, from having a workforce balance where, it's not the 9-to-5 drudgery job, and you connect your folks to a higher purpose, and you look after your people. I mean, the number one complaint by people with companies is that, my boss was an asshole. I just couldn't stand another day listening to him or her rattle off about something they knew nothing about, and this, that, and the other. I mean, when the competition to get talent and hold on to talent is critical. And, I remember, when I was in the teams, I remember one time I had an academy classmate who was a service warfare officer. And here's a perfect example. Service warfare guys driving ships, they work long hours, and there's no glory in it whatsoever, because how exciting is it to be in the bowels of a ship that's 120 degrees for your 8-hour shift, and then you got to go do other, duties, and then you get 4 hours of sleep, and then you go repeat the cycle for an entire deployment. Not a lot of motivation unless you've got a commanding officer that connects why your mission in the Navy is so important for sea lines and communications, so on and so forth. Most guys that went service warfare, they left after 5 years because they hate it and they were not inspired. Now, on the flip side, I have academy classmates that are still driving ships to this day, and they love it. And they've risen all the way up to captain, and some of them are here about to make admiral. But on the flip side, you got a SEAL team where everyone shows up to work every day, and you feed off that energy. And that's the kind of environment you want to be at, where people are always trying to be better with what they do. They're coming in early and they're staying in late. But it's also a work-life balance, because believe me, we worked very hard in the teams, but we also had a lot of fun. I mean, we had fun, and that you got to have that balance in life. And, if a guy came up to me and was like, hey, I got to go take care of my family, as soon as he even said the word, I'd be like, hey, get out of here. Because they don't, when they need a silver bullet from a good leader, when they have to come in and ask a favor, if it's a guy that comes in every week asking for the same thing, you're then going to start rolling your eyes because he's not a team player. He or she's not a team player. But when he or she, who's your hardest worker, comes up and simply says, boss, I can't make this event. I got to take care of something at the house. Hey, Joe, Susie, I got it. Go home. See you on Monday. And that's a balance, because you don't want to have leadership where you're so flexed that they'll take advantage of it, but you also want to have where you trust in your people. And that trust is a two-way street. And that relationship, it's like, I'm just telling you, I had so many great guys in the teams, and I trusted them. I mean, I literally had guys that I knew were better than me at their jobs. I trusted them to do their job. I gave them commander's intent. I gave them light guidance. I said, folks, here's the mission. Here's the requirements. Here's the timeline. Here's the outcomes we require. Any questions? Hey, sir, we got it. And then I'd come back 48 hours later, and that portion of the mission that I divvied out to 5 different guys, it would all come together to the brief we would give to the commanding officer, and we'd hit it out of the park, and the commander would say, all right, man, roger that, go execute the mission. And that's right. When you have such trust in your people that you don't need to hover over them. You don't need, they'll work the hours. They'll put in the overtime, and then they'll know when they need a day off and come in, hey, boss, I need a day off. Hey, get out of here. So, again, it's a two-way street. If you motivate your folks to a higher purpose, a higher cause, that only easy day was yesterday motto. I mean, it will, that's one thing about looking back on life as a former team guy or a veteran who's deployed Iraq and Afghanistan. I've been in worse environments. I've been on worse flights. I've had bigger delays. This is nothing. At the end of the day, no one's shooting at me. I'm going home to Tampa versus trying to get to another forward operating base in the middle of nowhere, Iraq, Afghanistan. So, life's gravy, and life, it's always worse on the other side. So take life in perspective, and take care of your people, and your people take care of you. That's a golden principle rule in the military and especially SEAL teams.
Yeah, it's true in the private sector. So, people are people, right? Treat them right, and you'll get more out of them. Well, man, Dan, thanks for taking the time to come on. It's been good getting to know you since last January. I'll see you January 17th, 2016. And for everybody listening, there'll be links on this as well if you want to track Dan down. But if y'all follow the helpwestswim.org, it's where you can donate to my swim on the Tampa Bay Frogman Swim, and 100% of the money goes to the Navy SEAL Foundation. Dan, and thanks. You're one of the organizers as well, right, that helped found the Frogman Swim?
I did, and it all came from helping motivate a young kid that was an aspiring SEAL when he was 9 years old, and that's how this thing got started. It was me mentoring a young kid for about a decade, and he wanted to honor a Navy SEAL that had stepped on a landmine in Afghanistan, and he wanted to swim across Tampa Bay, coldest day of the year, January 1 in 2010, and all to honor a Navy SEAL. And it's just been a payback forward event ever since. We've raised, year one brought in $33,000, year two $65K, then $125K, then $250K, and I think last year we brought in $380,000. And we've raised north of $1 million for the friends and family of fallen Naval Special Warfare SEAL operators who've taken the fight to the enemy for the past decade and a half. And it's humbling. It's humbling to see something that was really talk about connecting to a cause higher than self, and everyone involved in the swim, all volunteers, and we almost have to turn people away. It's become such an event on the Tampa St. Pete calendar, and it's all about a cause, connecting people to a cause higher than self, and it's a way for average Americans and especially Tampa and St. Pete community to come out and just spend a great day on the beach and either swim or support a swimmer or be a kayaker or just come out and volunteer or just come out and hang out on the day. So it's it's become a Tampa Bay icon event, and it's amazing because it really just grew out of a wonderful story, and that's what it's what life's all about. It's something that inspires others to do, go above and beyond, and that's what it's really all about at the end of the day, is to be a part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, I've got my 15-year-old daughter's coming out with me this year to help, and my dad's driving out again from Mobile, and my brother-in-law he was in the Navy. He's going to be my kayaker. So
awesome.
Bringing in the family.
Well, I will have a cold Budweiser waiting for you at the finish. That's what we had year one. I pushed out the email. And we'll provide no support. You better bring your own kayaker, bring a wetsuit. We'll get nothing on the beach except for a cold Budweiser when you finish. And I've made it a tradition to help hand out the finisher coins with the Gold Star families, the father and mothers and sisters and daughters and husbands that have lost, lost a serviceman or woman on the beach, and they're at the finish line helping me hand out the finisher's coin, and I'm sitting there usually with a silver, a can of Budweiser handing out. And Budweiser obviously is connected to the SEAL BUDS training, basic underwater demolition, and we call the Trident the Budweiser. So it's a little bit of inside story about why we. They're not our official sponsor, but they probably should be. There's a tie to Budweiser for every SEAL out there, and that's usually my brand of. If I'm going to drink a beer and it's a local American brand, it's going to be a Budweiser always.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I'm a simple man, and I swim for beer. So hey, I will see you at the other side of the bay.
Sounds great, Wes. Looking forward to it. We'll see you out there in January.
All right, man. Thanks, Dan, for coming on the show.
All right, take it. Take care.
Right.
Thank you.
I told you the guy's intense. Don't say I didn't warn you. You may have to go back and listen again just to catch everything. I think he spoke 3 hours worth of stuff in about 30 minutes right there. But those types of guys, that intensity, that passion, is who we need, making sure that our defenses are strong, that our troops are prepared. And so that's why I wanted to have him on the show. And remember, the whole reason we're doing this is this week of SEAL Week is to raise funds for the swim. So please, share this episode, share all these episodes from this week. Help people find these interviews. Help them find the Tampa Bay Frogman swim. Have them donate, and you donate too at helpwesswim.org. That'll redirect to a donation page. And that'll help me get across that chilly water. I'm an Air Force dude. I don't belong in the water. So, but when people start donating, it gives me the motivation, and a little pride kicks in. I got to finish. Just like last year is the first time I'd ever done it. I keep saying last year, although it was technically this year, January. But it was tough, but having a big goal and having people donate and having people cheer me on made it possible, really. So, and like I said, 100% of the money goes to the Navy SEAL Foundation that helps the families of wounded veterans, wounded SEALs, and SEALs that have died, given their all in defense of this country. So this helps their families try to recover and put the pieces back together. So, hey, thanks for listening. Be sure to share this. And as always, remember to sell different.